Welcome to The Explainer. You know, for years, there was one name you just couldn't escape in the news: ISIS. It was this terror group that somehow managed to build a state, a so-called caliphate, before it was bombed back into the shadows. So today, we're going to break down the anatomy of that terror state, how it was born from total chaos, how it ruled, and what kind of threat it still poses today. So let's get right into it. This is a wild story, really. A story of total collapse, an absolutely shocking rebirth, and a brutal, short-lived empire that, honestly, changed the way we think about the fight against terror. Think about this for a second. In less than 10 years, ISIS went from being pretty much wiped out to controlling a chunk of land the size of Great Britain. And then, just as fast, back to ruin. The big question is, how on earth did that happen? All right, so to really get how this explosion of violence was even possible, we've got to go back, way back to the chaos of the Iraq War. Because the seeds of what would become ISIS, they were planted long before most of us had ever even heard the name. So this group didn't just pop out of nowhere. It actually started as Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or AKI. And right from the get-go, these guys were known for being unbelievably brutal, even by jihadi standards. I mean, they were deliberately targeting Shia civilians, trying to kick off a full-blown civil war. But by 2008, a couple of things happened: a U.S. troop surge and, crucially, a revolt by Sunni tribes who were just sick of the violence. And that combo basically decimated AQI's ranks. For all intents and purposes, they were defeated. Done. But then, in 2010, a new leader takes over, a guy named Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And he was patient. He started rebuilding, piece by piece. He was smart, too. He recruited experienced former military officers from Saddam Hussein's old army and tapped into this deep, simmering anger among Sunnis in Iraq. And then, in 2011, boom, the Syrian Civil War kicks off right next door. It created the perfect power vacuum. This was the exact opportunity he'd been waiting for.
And this is where things get really interesting. This led to a fundamental split. In 2013, Baghdadi just breaks away from Al-Qaeda. You see, even Al-Qaeda's leadership thought his methods were too brutal. And his whole ambition to create a state, a caliphate right away, they thought it was just reckless. Al-Qaeda's game was attacking the far enemy, the West. Baghdadi, he wanted to build his empire right then and there, a totally different playbook.
So now, unchanged from Al-Qaeda and just fueled by all this chaos, ISIS launches this offensive that, well, it just stunned the world. The speed, the success, it was absolutely breathtaking. Nobody saw it coming. And it all came to a head on this one day, a day when the unthinkable happened. This was a moment that sent absolute shockwaves across the entire globe. Get this, just a few hundred ISIS fighters managed to take Mosul, which is Iraq's second biggest city. They completely routed tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers who, well, they just dropped their weapons and fled. The army just melted away. And just a few weeks after that, standing in Mosul's historic Al-Nouri Mosque, Baghdadi made a declaration that was just staggering. He proclaimed a global caliphate, the Islamic State. And he declared himself Caliph Ibrahim. He wasn't the leader of ISIS anymore. He was the leader of the Islamic State. And he demanded that every Muslim in the world pledge their loyalty to him. I mean, talk about an audacious claim to power. And with that new power came just unimaginable horror. In August of 2014, the group unleashed truly genocidal violence against the Yazidi minority in a place called Sinjar. They killed the men and enslaved thousands upon thousands of women and children. This was a clear attempt to wipe out an entire people. And that was the moment that prompted the first U.S. airstrikes. It was the beginning of a global response. The world simply couldn't stand by and just watch anymore. Okay, so what did these guys actually want? And what was it like to live under their rule? Let's take a look inside the so-called state they were trying to build. So at the very core of it all was this ideology, Salafi jihadism. It's a really extreme interpretation of Sunni Islam, and the whole goal is to basically recreate an early Islamic empire. It's totally absolutist, it's apocalyptic, and it justifies just horrific violence as some kind of divine duty. They truly believed they were fighting in an end-of-the-world battle to purify the globe by force. So life under ISIS, it was a complete regime of terror. Any little deviation could get you tortured or killed. But here's the crazy part.
it wasn't just chaos. They actually ran a pretty sophisticated administration. I'm talking about collecting taxes, managing oil fields, even running public services. All of it to fund their dystopian project. It was literally a nightmare state with a balance sheet. And their global strategy? You can find it right in their own propaganda. They called it eliminating the gray zone. The idea was to use these spectacular, horrifying acts of violence, think about the 2015 attacks in Paris, to polarize the entire world. They wanted to provoke a backlash against Muslims living in the West, to make it impossible to just coexist. They wanted to force everyone to choose a side. You were either with their caliphate or you were with the Crusaders. No in between. And how effective was this? Well, look at this number, 30,000. That's roughly how many foreign fighters from over 85 different countries had joined ISIS by the end of 2015. They were all lured in by this incredibly sophisticated online propaganda machine that promised them everything: glory, a sense of purpose, a starring role in some divine end-of-days battle. So, as you can imagine, the world's response had to be just as massive. It was, frankly, unprecedented. The sheer brutality and the very real global threat that ISIS posed, it forced this unlikely massive international coalition to come together to take it apart. You had a global coalition of more than 70 nations. It was called Operation Inherent Resolve, and they all united with one single mission: destroy ISIS. And this wasn't just a simple war. It was a multi-pronged attack. You had relentless airstrikes, of course, but you also had support for local ground forces, the Iraqi army, Kurdish fighters. Then there was a financial war to choke off all that oil money, and at the same time, an information war to fight back against their online propaganda. And the fight on the ground was just brutal and slow. We're talking street-by-street battles through completely ruined cities. But one by one, the strongholds of the Caliphate started to fall. Mosul and Raqqa, which were kind of their twin capitals, were both liberated in 2017. And it all culminated in this final, desperate stand at Baghouz, a tiny little village in Syria right on the banks of the Euphrates River. So with its territory completely gone, and its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, killed in a U.S. raid in late 2019, this state part of the Islamic State was, for all intents and purposes, officially over. But here's the thing. Defeating the Caliphate on the battlefield, well, that didn't defeat the idea behind it. The organization wasn't just completely snuffed out. It just changed its form. And that's the crucial point to understand now. The organization didn't vanish. It just transformed. It evolved from this kind of proto-state that held actual territory, and it went right back to what it used to be, a decentralized underground insurgency. So today, those embers are definitely still glowing. You've still got ISIS waging guerrilla warfare in Iraq and Syria, and their deadly brand continues to inspire active affiliate groups all over the globe, from ISWAP in Africa to ISIS-K over in Afghanistan. Plus, you have this huge humanitarian crisis with tens of thousands of ISIS family members stuck in detention camps, a potential ticking time bomb. And maybe most importantly, the root causes that let ISIS rise in the first place, the sectarianism, the instability, they're still very much there. And that really is the question, isn't it? The one that security experts and world leaders are still wrestling with. The physical caliphate is gone. Yes, it was destroyed. But the conditions that created it, the sectarian anger, the political instability, the extremist ideology that fueled the whole thing, none of that has disappeared. And that is a pretty sobering reminder that this story, it is far from over.